Hi everyone, I'm Pranoti, host of Under the Microscope. This series is brought to you by the Real Scientists Nano team. Our goal is to provide a platform where scientists can communicate their work and interact with the public. With that in mind, every week we introduce you to a scientist working in the field of materials or nanoscience, who tweets from the Real Scientists Nano Twitter account, which is realsci_nano. Hi everyone, my name is Pranoti and I am your host of Under the Microscope podcast. And today we have with us Luis de Jesus, who is an assistant professor at the University of Buffalo in New York, close to New York. 20 kilometers, I'm going to keep remembering that, 20
Yeah.
kilometers west of New York. Hi, Luis.
Yeah, well, I mean, it might be more than 20 kilometers from the city, right? Like, so the state of New York is a very big state. We are actually we're like 20 minutes from Canada is where we are. Like,
20 minutes from Canada, right? Oh, okay. I hope people forgive me for my.
yeah, it's fine. Like, it's, I mean, Western New York is very interesting because, again, University of Buffalo is a state university. It's the state university of New York. And it's on an area or it's on a side of New York that people don't think, because when the society, I guess, says New York, they always think about the city.
Manhattan.
And that's like Manhattan, yeah, Brooklyn, Bronx, right? Like
Central Park.
all Queens, right? Like all that area, especially with Marvel and Spider-Man being a New York superhero, right?
Yeah.
It's on the east of that's the east of the state of New York.
East of the state.
If you drive 7 hours west, then you get to Buffalo.
Well, I didn't say 20 minutes by which mode of transport, so maybe with like a jet or something.
Sure, yeah. If you get a nice plane, yeah, it's where the Niagara Falls are.
We are closer to the Niagara Falls than to Manhattan.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, perfect.
We are.
Geography lesson for the day done. Check. Okay, let's talk about your science and your journey to become an assistant professor now at Buffalo. You mentioned in the short podcast that you're from Puerto Rico. How does a kid from Puerto Rico, become an assistant professor at the University of Buffalo? Tell me.
That's a very interesting question. So, story goes, legends tell that I used to be very curious when I was little. My mom had this story of one of my first experiments being checking if the light in the refrigerator would keep on when you close the door. And I would very simply open and close the door, notice the light change. It's like, oh, that's interesting. What is happening here? Until I find that button that actually controls the turning on and off of the light. And that was like my first experiment ever. And but there, I was privileged enough to have parents who noticed that and try to see like where in the sciences I would go. So I had like the opportunity of having like a science kit for like doing simple chemistry. My mom would buy me books of science experiments, and then we would do the science experiments. And it was not until I took chemistry in high school that I was like, yes, this is what I want. Now I started with the idea that I wanted to do more pharmacy. I want to be a pharmacist. So I went to the University of Puerto Rico at Calle to study chemistry, to become a pharmacist. And in Calle, they had this program funded by the NIH called the RICE program. That whole idea. Sorry?
What is NIH?
NIH is the National Institute of Health. It's one of the funding agencies in the United States. So the United States has two major governmental funding agencies. the NIH, the National Institute of Health, is one of them. Then you have the National Science Foundation, and then you have more like the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense. So all of those are funding agencies, and this program, which is RISE, it stands for Research Initiative for Student Enhancement. The idea of that program was to give students the opportunity of doing research over the summer in the United States.
Okay.
And I was accepted in the program. I was accepted to do research here in the United States, and that completely changed the course of my career. That idea of like getting data out of experiments, sitting down, looking at the data, figuring out what each peak means, what each where's the story, where are we going with this, what needs to be done next. That completely captivated me. That was that whole process of like sitting down and thinking on a trying to solve a very big problem, but in a very minute space. Like that for me was extremely interesting, more so than like pharmacy. So when I came back from the United States that first year in 2009, I told my whole family I'm doing a PhD. That's going to be my next thing.
Where were you in the United States?
So I was in it's called City of Hope Hospital. It's a cancer treatment hospital in Duarte, California. And there I was doing organic chemistry to try to synthesize this cancer treatment drug. And that was one of my first experiences as a chemist. But like that's not materials. So how did I get into materials? That's the story. Is like I was trying to look for my niche, where I wanted to do my PhD, or how, or in what. And I did a stint in organic chemistry. I did a stint in biochemistry. And it was until I did a summer experience in Buffalo, at the University of Buffalo. I worked in biomaterials, and then that was it. That for me was like the moment, like I said, like I like materials. This is what I want. I like the idea of like studying something that is completely like, and I think it was more of the fact that in the University of Puerto Rico we didn't have anything related to materials or solids, any class or research on it. So it was completely new to me, and I said like that's what I want.
That is so cool. And then you did a PhD, and then you probably did a postdoc, and then you are now the assistant professor at the University of Buffalo. Yeah,
so I did a PhD at Texas A&M University for Professor Sarbajit Banerjee. So my work there was related to studying the mechanisms of lithium-ion intercalation in V2O5, which is a solid materials, and V2O5 undergoes a lot of phase transitions. So whenever, depending on the concentration of lithium, the crystal structure, what makes that solid of the electrode, has to change to be able to accommodate all of the lithium. Then after that, I worked with Professor Tom Maluk at the University of Pennsylvania, where we were studying this layer material called MXenes, which is a titanium carbide. It's a kind of new structure, carbide structure, and we were trying to look for ways to synthesize that material in a more environmentally friendly way, or without the use of very strenuous environments. And now going into as an assistant professor again, the full circle kind of thing, came back to Buffalo. As an assistant professor, I'm trying to combine those two things. I want to synthesize materials that, and then when I focus on the properties of it, see what kind of changes happen, specifically what are the phase transitions, and can we understand that better? Can we stabilize phase transitions into like these new phases that like are not seen in usually in nature? Because again, it depends on a very specific type of stimuli for it to happen.
Right. So, Luis, I have a very like a mean question for you. Probably mean, probably not. Do you have a favorite material from your
Do I
point?
have a favorite material? Oh wow. I don't have a favorite materials, but I do have favorite elements that comprise materials.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, go for it, please. Give us your
So,
top material elements.
yeah. So, so just to clarify, when we think about materials, let's think about things that are solid, right? And more specifically, let's think about like things that are solid that do a specific like function.
Yes. And who would go to the nanoscale or microscale, because, well, let's face it, we are under the microscope, and usually what you need microscopes for is micromaterials or nanomaterials.
Yeah. So if you let's use the example of like graphite to graphene. Right, like so you take off the layers of graphene within graphite until you get like a close to single layer material. You get graphene, the properties changes. You can use it for like different types of either semiconducting chips, or like if you want catalysis, if you want to trap things, right? So when I think about my favorite element, I have to mention vanadium. So vanadium is an extremely versatile element. It can have like, it has a gamut of oxidation states. So that changes the type of bondings that it does. It has you can have different type of like elements be bonding with vanadium. So you can have just like this very beautiful combination of materials that can be formed, vanadium oxide, vanadium sulfide, right? And so vanadium for me is very close to my heart because of, thanks to it, I got my PhD, so to speak.
Right. So do you celebrate on the 5th of November?
Sorry?
Do you celebrate on 5th of November?
Do I celebrate the 5th of November? No, I don't celebrate the 5th of November in that way.
Okay. Okay, sorry, that was a really, really shitty joke. Sorry, I take it back.
No, why? No, don't take it bad. It's good. It
was a good one. Joke. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. But more than that, so one thing that I want to explore as an assistant professor is what is known as high entropy alloys. And in high entropy alloys are materials that have like 5 or more transition metals.
Now you're giving me a material class, Luis. I asked you for materials and then we said elements. Now you're giving me like material class. I see what you're doing there. You're not picking your favorites. Vanadium, we have one, but well, let.
I mean, the thing is, it's not easy to pick a specific material. Because of the reason of there's not one material that is a panacea, right? There's not one material that solves all the problems.
Isn't graphene doing that?
Is it? I mean,
I thought graphene is doing that, right? That's the.
Well, graphene has been suggested to be doing that, but is it doing that?
No.
Yeah, they claim, exactly. They claim, and but there's so many things that you can do with graphene. Graphene is a beautiful material, but it's not a solution. That's why, for example, graphene. One of the idea for graphene is combining it in a heterostructures with other layer materials like hexagonal boron nitride, molybdenum disulfide, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's so it's not as the solution, it's part of the solution. And this is why like it's very difficult to choose a material. I can be biased towards like an element like vanadium, but when I think about like how can we solve the big problem, it's you have I need to expand that like palette of
Absolutely.
materials.
Absolutely.
And then as a scientist, go under the microscope. See what I did there? See what I did there?
I like that. I like
And and explored, you know, those singular changes that occur. And that's why when I think about like my research ideas, they're not onto one materials, right? They're more of like a concept. I want to understand better phase transitions and how can I stabilize them. That I'm not thinking about a material. I do have a material system, right, that I want to study, like high entropy alloys, transition metal dichalcogenides.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say this is it, because I don't think as a scientist you should have favorite, unless, I mean, ask me in 10 years again and see if I have a favorite. Maybe I
Absolutely.
have one material that got me tenure,
So
and I'm
yeah,
like, yeah, that's it, the material, that's the
that makes
material.
complete sense. Let's stick with vanadium for now, because that's what got you your PhD. And 10 years later or 5 years later, whenever you get your tenure or get like your grant or whatever, then you come on the podcast again under the microscope and tell us your then current favorite material. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so, Louis, you already spoke a little bit about your current research in the short podcast, but what I would like to understand from you now is that where does it fit in this big picture of materials and nanoscience? Like, do you fabricate material, or do you only characterize? Do you like where does it fit? Because material science is it's a huge field.
Right.
Yeah.
So so I want to synthesize materials and then get them characterized completely, but more into, again, specifically how do phase move within a solid. And the reason I want to do that is mainly to be able to stabilize and understand, can we get these novel phases out of the transition and stabilize that specific phase. One thing that is my PhD advisor is expert on, and I helped develop that in our lab, was the idea of using what is known as metastable phases. So phases, structures of materials that are not thermodynamically stable. They're more in the metaverse, let's say, like now, like Facebook, right? So
I was
they're
thinking about Avengers, but okay.
yeah, sure. So these are phases that are usually not easy to stabilize in nature, because nature usually likes to go into the most stable one. But the way that we're thinking about stable phases have changed a lot thanks to nano. So now, when you take a material that is in the bulk, so micrometer size, and now you drop it down to nanometer size, you can kinetically trap metastable phases, depending on the stimuli that you do to that specific material. And this is my PhD advisor worked on vanadium oxides and a lot of oxides, like basically vanadium oxide, hafnium oxides, um, uh, different type of like chlorides as well. And now I want to move away from that and then think about like this novel class of materials, the high entropy materials. Now we have this whole combination of transition metals in this solid. It's very well known that there's phase transitions that happen with it. I want to defocus into from the crystal, from the actual solid, and then refocus into the electronic structure or the actual bonding that is happening between these materials,
Right.
or these elements within the solid.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I understand it a bit more, because this is a completely new field for me. Because when you said phase transition, the first thing that came to my mind is those difficult phase diagrams and stuff. But now I understand it better. I only know yeah.
So the phase diagrams has helped for a long time, like not only chemists, but like people, mineralogists, people that focus on specifically the crystal structure.
Yeah.
Metalloids, right? Like,
yeah.
So you have this combination depending on the temperatures, usually, right? In the phase diagrams, you have this change into either a solid, liquid, or gas, which are phases, but you also have like the alpha phases, the beta phases, and all these phases that occur within a solid structure. So that transition, there's all these bonding changes that occur in that transitions that usually we can't see, because you saw the start, you saw the finish, the middle is a whole like mess of changes. I want to see that middle. And is there something else there? Like, or can we use those changes for our benefits? Because if we can think about like, oh, this phase transition helps in that phase transition helped in conductivity. So maybe if we can trap that transition, right? If we can get that specifically and understand the bonding that occur there, we can either tailor make other materials to look like this, or we can try to trap that specific phase that occur in the middle, that metastable phase, to be able to then use that for whatever benefit we want to use it for, usually energy devices or catalysis.
Okay, excellent. That sounds good. That sounds very good. So, Luis, my suspicion, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, is that you have been involved in a lot of interesting research projects or experiments in your career so far. So, if you have to pick one research project that you're most proud of, or the most fun or quirky one, could you pick one and explain it to us in simple words in the section we call In Other Words?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the most fun, difficult, but at the same time interesting project I did was during my PhD. I was using a microscope. It's called an XRay microscope. So specifically, it's a scanning transmission X-ray microscope.
Scanning transmission. So, okay,
STXM.
XTSM. Interesting. Okay, I know EDX. I know SAX, SAXS, but you were using a very, very new combination of letters for me. Okay. Scanning,
so
transmission, X-ray microscope.
Okay, so let's digest that a little bit before we go into the details.
Please.
So it's a microscope, right? So we're looking into something very small.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Easy. It's X-ray. So instead of using sunlight, or using electrons like they do in like EDX mapping, or in TEM, so transmission electron, we're using X-rays. So for this, you have to go to a synchrotron.
Right.
So a synchrotron is this facility, right, that takes electron almost to the speed of light, and every time the electron curves, it emits X-rays.
Right.
So you use those X-rays to then power, or to be able to see them as a microscope.
So the synchrotrons are the ones that look like donuts from the helicopter.
They look like donuts from the helicopter. They're and they sync the injection of electrons with electrons that are already in movement to be able to keep that donut powered.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm with you. Okay, X-rays we have, microscope we have. Next.
So it's transmission.
Right.
So your sample has to be thin. It has to follow exactly all the rules of TEM in that sense. It has to be thin because you're using X-rays, and then you basically focus the X-rays towards your sample, and then you're measuring the absorbance that comes out, or the transmission that comes out.
Okay. Okay, so if you know the transmission, then you will know the absorption as well.
Right, it's exactly.
Okay.
Right. And then scanning, because for you to generate an image, you have to raster scan.
Raster, the thing like a snake.
Exactly. So
you can see what I'm doing, but on Spotify,
you go pixel by pixel from left to right usually, and each pixel will start generating an image depending on the transmission, which then relates to the absorbance.
Right. Right.
And the beauty of this is that you are using it as a microscope, so you're looking at very small things.
Right.
But at the same time, since you're using X-rays and you're doing transmission, so you can take the absorbance, you can actually have a spectrum associated to each pixel.
That is so cool.
Right. So then now you have, all these, like when you do like electron diffraction in the TEM to map, right, to be able, that gives you a lot of information about like the crystal structure.
Right.
But once you use the X-ray microscope, you get a lot of information about the electronic structure. So about the bonding of that solid, or it could be, if you have a cell, you can do liquids. So it's very versatile tool. But in my case, it was solid.
That sounds so cool. Oh my God, that's really cool. So what was your material?
So my material was V2O5, vanadium oxide.
V2O5, vanadium. I was speaking with the vanadium oxide. Okay.
Hey, that's the best one. And I was doing vanadium oxide. I was using nanowires of vanadium oxide. And what we did was, like, we reacted these vanadium oxides with lithium to be able to and control the amount of lithium that was in the vanadium oxide. So we then went to the microscope, and we saw a very distinct change in the electronic structure. So how the bonding are arranging within vanadium oxide, which is completely makes sense.
Yeah.
Because like, we know phase transition exists in vanadium oxide, so we know that there was a different phase happening within the material. Now, since we can see pixel by pixel, I was able to develop a map of how of different phases within this 1 nanowire of V2O5. And it shows domains of like very high lithium concentration and domains of low lithium concentration. So this suggests that there was a difference in how in the speed for a single nanowire reacted in the same conditions as the rest of the nanowire. There are different domains, so that suggests that there's the kinetics, so that the speed at which lithium diffuses or move within the material was different depending on the area.
Yeah.
And we were able to relate this to a quasi particle known as a polaron. And a polaron is the coupled movement of an electron and a phonon, and a phonon is a vibration of the solid. So in other words, if you have this polaron moving at the same time that you have the lithium moving. And those two movements are concerted. They have to happen at the same time. So if something stops the polaron, it stops the lithium moving.
Right.
So then you now have these domains of low concentration of lithium. So lithium did not make a well there, did not move into those spaces.
Correct.
And then areas of high lithium concentration,
Mm-hmm.
that like where the polaron and the lithium were able to move.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is that if these two spaces are contrasting,
Mm-hmm.
and they create stress and strain on the material, and this is the main reason why electrode materials break,
Right.
because of this stress that exists between these two phases.
Right.
And so
right.
this is a problem, right? So there's all this expansion happening in one area, and the other area stays the same. So and imagine that happening every single time that you recharge your battery and use your battery, recharge, and then that breaks the material and goes into failure, and then you lose the capacity, you lose. That's why for like a 5-year-old cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
there's almost like no battery.
Yeah, the battery life goes down because of this reason. Wow, that sounds so cool. Oh my God, I hope you will share the pictures from this cool experiment, and I can totally imagine why you picked this research project or experiment as the one that you're one of the ones that you're most proud of. Let's not play favorites here.
Right. No favorites.
No
favorites at all.
No favorites.
Science is science, right? Like, so no favorite.
No favorite. So, Luis, after talking to you for almost an hour now, I have the feeling that you like the research aspect of being a scientist. But what else do you like about being a scientist other than research?
So like opportunities like this, I like the idea of talking to a community, and so I think, coming from Puerto Rico, and coming to the US, looking at the state of society as it is right now, and this is not new. There's a disconnect between science and how science is understood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's two different things.
Absolutely.
And so, like, for me, it's very important to have conversations and about of science. I'm a fair believer that science is not only done in the lab. I think it's done in the coffee shops. I think it's done in the parks, right?
Right.
You sit down, you pondered on the questions of the universe, and then you come up with ideas.
Absolutely.
So more than the research aspect of like going to lab, doing the experiment, working hard, which is fine, that's we have that down. I think it's also very important for us to develop ideas on making science simple.
Mm-hmm.
So more people can understand it, and it's not this, oh, that's hard. Like every time I tell people, oh, I'm a chemist, oh, that's the worst.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's the worst. Ooh, like I did not like that chemistry at all. It's like, well, so my usual answer is like, well, maybe you didn't have the best educator in chemistry, and that's okay.
I agree.
So let's see how
we can change that. Yeah.
How can we give teachers the tools to give like to explain chemistry in a very exciting and novel ways, not just teaching that H2 plus O2 makes 2H2O, right? So let's think about like other ways that we can teach chemistry. And how can we make this conversation one that is straightforward, is simple. So that concept of science, of that science communication part, for me is very important.
That sounds great. We are so happy to have you and have you communicate your science to our community and to us as well. And also, I'm totally like I'm in. I want to go back to research tomorrow. It sounds so cool. Louis, you have been in the field for what, more than 10 years now?
That's right.
You
Yeah.
started your science journey over a decade ago. So what advice would you give yourself if you were to go back in time and to the young Louis who was starting his research journey over a decade ago? What advice would you give yourself, or what advice would you give to the scientists who are starting out today? Like any, please share.
So being an underrepresented individual in the sciences,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and this goes to if you're a Latinx, if you're African American, if you're a woman, if you like, take as much space as you need.
Mm-hmm.
Just take it. Don't be afraid to take it. And there's all these power dynamics that are happening in academia that they're very unfortunate, and hopefully as we start taking up space, that power dynamics keeps changing. um and the second thing that like I have to say is like take also breaks. Like
Yes.
I used to be one, and there's reasons because of this, that I was a train. I was just going forward without even thinking about breaks. Um, and so I think that if I were to talk to me or any other one, it's like it's okay to take breaks. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's, it's okay if you are doing too much science. When do you have a chance to think?
Absolutely.
Um, so I think it's okay to take breaks as well. And so those are the two things that I would tell young Luis or any other one. Like take as much space as you need.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's okay to be um, out loud. And this stereotype of being the loud Latinx person is something that has followed me since the beginning, and it's something that I now embrace. I'm
That's
loud,
very good. I
and it's
that's
I like to wear piercings, right? Like so, like
you're the
it's
coolest
I have
one.
I have tattoos, and like I don't care about like it's okay to be like that. It's okay to be yourself
Yeah,
in this space,
ab-
however that looks. And it doesn't mean like at the beginning of it. If you decide to change in the middle, perfect.
that's
It's
fine as well. Just be you and take as much space as you need and want, especially if you're coming from minority, underrepresented groups. That's definitely, and also take breaks. So, Luis, I hope your research experience has been wonderful so far. However, if you had three wishes to improve your research experience, what would you ask for? And I'm not promising anything here.
Yeah. So I will have to go back to that idea of taking breaks sooner.
Uh-huh.
I think that the way that we think about science is always like producing, and it wasn't until recently that I started doing taking like therapy, going to a therapist, and talking about like some of my like personal issues, and the way that now I see research and science has been improved. Thanks to that like improvement in mental health in
Mhm.
general. And now as a professor, I look into furnishing a research environment that is productive, that is motivating, and that doesn't cause burnouts. Like I don't want my students to like feel like they need to completely disregard their mental health for science.
Mhm.
Um,
Second
the
way.
second the second which is that I think I wish sometimes my kind of research moves quicker.
Okay.
I'm a fast paced person. I'm out there. I'm athletic. I run. I like to run and all that stuff. And then when I go to research, I need to like
Come on.
calm down and sit down. And sometimes I wish like, hey, I hope why isn't like research like moves in my speed, like how and I know that that's like a big wish because research is its own speed.
Yeah.
But yeah, like sometimes it's more of a, man, I've done this experiment 15 times, right? Like I just want it to work.
Yeah.
But I know that that's the nature of research, but that's sometimes I think that internally one of those abstract idea of like, if research move quicker, then we could understand better and quicker the science.
Right.
And a third which is more of like I wish that I wish more eminent scholars would be available to meet with like students, postdocs, and like early career scientists. I think there's a way that you can still mentor students that are not your students by just meeting, right?
Yeah.
By having that opportunity of like getting a coffee with like an eminent scholar. And I'm not saying like, oh, let's meet all Nobel Prizes people. But I'm saying like there's people out there that are eminent but I feel like sometimes they're like in their own circle.
Yeah.
And
available to the general public or scientists.
And it's difficult to break that circle. Yeah. So I wish that if I think that if conversations were there with the perspectives that come from individuals like us in science, in addition to like their insight into like the workings of science, I think especially individuals of underrepresented backgrounds would benefit from that.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. All three of your wishes are very thoughtful, I must say, and they're realistic as well to some extent. I mean, we have someone like you who is an assistant professor now, who is an active researcher. So I have high hopes from the future, about the future of research, about future of science and academia. Luis, this has been wonderful, but before I let you go, I have to ask you one last question.
This is the last question.
It's the last question, yeah.
It's the last question.
It's the last question. It's a very important one. And it's about, what are your learnings from the year 2020? Something happened, in case you forgot.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot that happened. A lot.
Yeah. Something happened that affected all of us. Ways.
Does it start with pan and ends with demic?
Or like... Yeah. That's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. One of the biggest learnings is that we are more connected than we think. So as scientists, it's important to understand that whatever discovery that you make is not only for your
paper.
It's not only for like your people, exactly. It's for everyone. And there's more people that get more affected by things that happen than others.
True.
So like we need to look into again, going into the communities and looking into serving them as well. What are their necessities and how can we serve them?
Absolutely.
And finally, that it's okay to take a break or two. I mean,
breaks. That is a very positive note to end on. So thank you very much, Luis. Really excited to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This is Pranoti, host of Under the Microscope. To know more about us, visit our website, thesciencetalk.com, and follow us on Twitter at realsci_nano.